10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
And hello, everybody. It's good to see you all. Thank you for joining me. This is Michael Voss. I'm the Dragon of the Southern Tier, and I'm here with the No Soundbites Allowed podcast on the exceptional conservative network. That's right, TECN.TV. This is our first episode, and I'm happy to be here with everyone. I'm exceptionally happy to be here with the TECN crew, the entire channel. For people who don't know about TECN, it's a new network. It's a new channel for conservatives with a conservative bent. And it's a new outlet for those of us who are smaller. We're not Fox. We're not one of the majors. We're not Rush Limbaugh and so forth. Or Glenn Beck and his network with the Blaze TV. But it's the same concept. It is individuals like you, like me, who are conservative, Republican, Libertarian, Democrats as well, who are out there who want to hear a different viewpoint on many of the issues that are affecting us all every day. And that's what I'm here to do. That's what my goal is, because I believe in very deeply and very seriously, I believe in the thought that we need to have conversation. That's why we have the First Amendment, to be able to talk about the politics that affect us every day and to consider what is next. What are the ramifications of everything we're doing today in politics, and how is that going to affect us tomorrow, our kids, our grandkids, and so forth. And that's something that we don't always hear a lot of, especially from politicians, especially from the news media. News media often is looking, the mainstream news media is often looking for that next big story, that next big eye-catching headline. And we've kind of, with the advent of social media, with so much information that is available for everyone, we see a lot of individuals that read just the headline. They don't go into the actual content. They don't actually go into the story, and they miss so much of what is actually going on and what the impact of these decisions are. And so that's what we're going to talk about a bit. And you may not always agree, and that's perfectly fine. I appreciate that. What I do, so for those of you who don't know me at the TECN network or otherwise, or just finding me, I like to look at the facts. Here are the facts. This is what we know for sure. And what does that mean? Where does that take us? And we go from there. Because that's what political commentary, in my view, should do. When it's done right, here are the facts. Here's how I get to that conclusion. This is what I believe is the case and the impact. And we get to discuss it. And we get to influence politicians on how they vote because we're talking about it. I've seen this happen. That's why I speak to Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, libertarians, and I speak with them about policy and issues, and I have seen this. We can affect elections, and we do. Not only with our votes, but with our attention to what's happening out there. So with all that said, and I'm supposed to be checking my time here because we're going to be going for the next hour together, and there's several different issues I want to address. Things that you probably aren't hearing about in the news, a different take in some of the issues that are going on out there. And in fact, one of the things I want to start off with, and bear with me as I set this up, it's a little different than the way I do it with my channel. But one of the things I want to talk about is obviously an issue a lot of people haven't heard about. In fact, it was something I talked about back in 2015. And this is the Syrian Kurds. Now, I know almost nobody knows anything about this. There's really nothing in the mainstream media talking about Syrian Kurds or the Turkey or Iraq and what's going on with the Kurdish community out there. It's something that really gets overlooked. It's massively important. If we're talking about the Middle East and we're talking about the future of the Middle East, we're talking about America's involvement in the Middle East, then we cannot not talk about this issue. And I've spoken about it, as I said, back in 2015, a couple times since then. I've looked into it, and I do follow this. And a lot of the news comes from overseas, and Reuters and some of the other news agencies. Now, let me give you the background here real quick. Obviously, we're fighting in ISIS, in Al-Qaeda, and their fragments. And the fighting right now is going on in Syria. And one of the biggest groups, or one of the major groups that are out there that the United States backs, is a group that's called the YPG. Their names are difficult for me to pronounce, so I apologize for that. But it's considered the YPG. They are an offshoot of another organization, which is called the PKK. So we're going to go by the initials, the acronyms of the groups, like ISIS is an acronym for the terrorists, that terrorist organization of Islamic State, the YPG and the YKK. Now, the YKK is considered a terrorist organization by the United States, by Europe, by pretty much most of the world, and especially Turkey. The YPG is also part of the YKK. They are basically Kurdish rebels who are fanatical, at least according to Turkey. And while they're fighting ISIS, they are also fighting Turkey. And this has been going on for 30 years, since 1984. And a lot of that comes out of the article that I wrote in 2015, which you can check out for yourself. And you'll be able to see a lot of the information I went over there. And that'll tell you what we're talking about, that there is so much happening here. But one of the big things that I want to emphasize in this story, and you can go to my website, which is the MVAS Political Commentary, or MVASS, and at the bottom of my 2015 article, we noted, and the big concern here is that this is all a process that is very familiar. I mentioned then, quote, the progression all sounds familiar. The U.S., under a misguided international policy, in particular under the Obama administration, has picked an enemy, in this case Syria, that it wants to take out. To do so, it supplies the funds, organizations with questionable motives and significant issues with America, the YPG, ISIS, Syrian rebels. The support of these organizations leaves allies and generally most Middle East nations angered by the U.S. interference with the political balance in the region. Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Israel are all examples. Iran sees and presses forward on the gains made by the confused U.S. actions. Several years later, due to the power vacuum created by the U.S., as well as the support, a new experienced organization rises to power and eventually goes after the U.S., as we saw with ISIS. This is history. This has happened before. It will happen again if the United States moves forward without a very clear understanding of what we're doing today is going to influence tomorrow. The kids that are left over that have no one to turn to in these vacuums, in these war-torn areas, they are sought out by extremist groups. Those extremist groups raise those kids from 6, 10, 12. And by the time the kids are 14, 16, they're child soldiers. And now they're fighting a new war, and this goes forward. And now we have generational fights, which is why you see the Middle East every 20 years or so often seem to erupt into violence. Well, within a 20-year period, the kids that were abandoned have now become the next generation of fighters with whatever regional extremist group. And then they continue that. That's why that area is so difficult. And that's why the United States has to be so careful about what we choose to do in that region. And we haven't always been. And that's important because we need to be very careful there. And by the way, I'm checking the chat and I'm also trying to get through the pages here as we're talking. So this is something I brought up in 2015 because at the time, the U.S. policy on international policy, especially in regards to the Middle East, was deplorable. It was abject failure. It was chaos. We saw that in Benghazi. We saw that with the Green Wave in Iran. I believe it was called the Green Wave. Yeah, Green Wave in Iran. We saw that in Libya. We saw that throughout the entire Middle East under President Obama. It was scattershot, and very often we were aligning with groups like the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and other locations throughout the Middle East. That added to that chaos. We needed a new plan. We still do need a new plan. And that's when the United States started backing some of the regional fighters instead of using U.S. troops and allowing them to go forward. Now, this is the same idea that we did in Afghanistan in the 1980s, which led to Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda gaining firearms, training, heavy weapons that they were able to then go forward and attack the United States and to attack around the world. So it's a very big concern. And here we are. It's 4 years later, in 2019. Has the U.S. learned? Do we know any better? And the first place I'd stop at to figure out, did we learn anything here, is we have to go to the question of what happened in November of 2018. See, in November of 2018, the United States, and this is reported by Reuters News, okay, on November 7th of 2018, Turkey came to the United States and said, we got to stop. We're rewarding the PKK. We are helping the terrorists because we were helping the YPG. And that is a problem. It's a threat to Turkey, according to the article in Reuters, that the United States is doing the wrong thing. Now, the response by the United States is, we give them only light weapons. That's one reason why they have not been as successful recently against Daesh or Islamic State or ISIS as they have been in the past. They do not have tanks. They do not have artillery. We do not give them such heavy weapons. Now that's a big difference. That's a major change. And apparently we learned something from what we did with ISIS. We learned what we did wrong in creating al-Qaeda. Is that enough? Maybe not. Probably not. It's seriously not. And the thing that we have to keep in mind here is that still means we are arming a group of insurgents in a region who are getting trained and organized and learning how to be a proper military organization. And this organization, if it is not the YPG, if it is not a terrorist group, it is directly aligned with a terrorist group, the YKK, which makes our allies, especially Turkey, pissed off at the United States. This is a problem because we're about to get rid of ISIS. We are in the process of destroying ISIS. It is a great success by President Trump. And we have to be very happy about that. That's a wonderful thing to know that we have destroyed ISIS. And finally, we will remove that threat from the world. The problem is, what happens next? In a region where we know there is a next. There is something else that will follow up. So the question we have to ask is, how is this shaping? How is it coming together? Well, that brings us to the next thing, which is in Turkey, just yesterday, March 11th of 2019, we see that Turkey protesting that the Belgian courts took a ruling on an issue about why PKK, the Kurdish terror group, and they're around the world. They're like Al-Qaeda. They're like ISIS. They have cells in Europe. They possibly have them in the United States, even though no one's talking about it. And in this article, which is released by the Associated Press, sorry about that, we see that the Belgian courts said that their recruiting of people to join their terrorist organization didn't happen, that there was no proof. And I'm not saying that they did or they didn't. That's what the Belgian court decided. There was not enough proof to say that they were recruiting Belgians to go over and fight for the PKK, for the terrorist organization, or for the YPG for that matter, the two different groups, both fighting in Syria. This sounds like the exact same starting point that we saw with Al-Qaeda, where they were backed by the United States, they were armed by the United States, they were trained by the United States in Afghanistan. They then went out with their message across the world looking for disfranchised individuals, youth, who were willing to accept their ideology and to recruit them, train them, and then they went out and started their international terror campaign. It's a scary thing. No one's talking about this in the United States. Everyone should be talking about this in the United States. This is a big deal for the United States. We need to talk more about this. I'm concerned about this. That's why I wrote the article in 2015 when no one was talking about it. That's why I've been following it since then. And that's why I'm talking about it with you today. That's part of the purpose of No Soundbites Allowed, to bring up the issues that nobody's talking about. And to let you know about it. And let's have a discussion about it. And I definitely want to hear what people have to think about it. And I'm going to give you a moment to try and have a chance to think about that, because as the beeper just went off, we don't have a lot of time. There's a lot of things to talk about, and I do want to address some other issues. So we're going to take a quick break. Should be about 3 minutes, 3.5, and then we'll be back and we'll go on to the next issue. But remember, I'm looking at the chat. I'm looking at Twitter, Facebook. I'm checking it all out. So let me know your thoughts, and let's talk more about this. And I'll be right back with you. folks, we're coming right back, and I'm happy to be here with you again. Thank you for enjoying the break with me. My name is Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier at the No Soundbites Allowed podcast here on the TECN network, the exceptional conservative network.tv. And I'm happy to be here with you all. So, and I should have took the sip of coffee before I came back, but bear with me. And I'm enjoying my time with you, and I will be here Tuesdays at 1 o'clock until 2. I will be back on Thursday at 1 o'clock until 2, and then on Saturday from 12 noon until 2 p.m. And we'll be following that schedule probably for the next few weeks as the network grows, and we're adding in other some of our other artists and great interviewers, podcasters, and I'll have various interviews going on as well. In fact, we may at some point during this conversation, or perhaps on Thursday, may be hearing from Representative Anthony Brindisi of the New York 22nd District, and I look forward to that conversation. And I'll go into detail about why he would be calling. There's a very specific issue we'll be talking about if he calls in. And of course, all politicians are invited, and we have several guests that we're looking to bring in pretty soon as well. But in this part, and we'll be going for about another 13 minutes or so, 15 minutes, I want to talk a little bit about something that's a little different, and a totally different issue, actually. And so again, something you probably didn't hear about, something that's probably gone right past everyone. And I don't know if anyone's even noticed it yet. So let's talk about this. It'll be kind of interesting. Did you know that there is a plan to dim the sun, to cool the earth? And I want to be very clear about that. They want to dim the brightness of the sun on the earth. Basically, they want to block the rays of the sun on the earth. And that's a pretty extreme thought. And it's amazing that our technologies move so far that we could even consider trying to do something with the environment to be able to block the sun's rays. And this is kind of a countermeasure to the environmentalist green energy Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez movement to say, well, global warming, climate change, the world is going to end in the next 12 years. Mind you, this has been going on for the idea of dimming the sun has been going on longer than they've been around. But it's now, in the last 5 years, we've seen it taken very seriously and very credibly. And so we have scientists at Harvard who are trying to figure out how to get this done, how they might be able to dim the sunlight reaching the earth. Now, there's a bunch of problems with this. I mean, one of the biggest things is we're talking about just looking at the Green New Deal, listening to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Their idea is they want to increase solar energy. They want everyone to use solar energy, both individually on your home and as well as for the other 76 million buildings in the United States alone. And I've talked about this at length. There are a ton of problems. Michael Schellenberger, which I just did a podcast on about 2 days ago, has wonderful insight on this, about how this is not feasible. The renewable energy craze is just that. It's a craze. It's a fad. It doesn't work. And there's the problem. It doesn't work. And he explains, and this is an environmentalist. Michael Schellenberg is a noted, well-known environmentalist speaking about this. And you can check out his TED Talk that I reviewed and spoke about to get more information on him. But what I do want to talk about in dimming the sun. So the first problem is, if we do this, one of the immediate consequences that no one's talking about is we know that it will affect us getting solar energy. So it defeats the Green New Deal. So if they try and dim the sun to lower the temperature on the planet to counteract global warming, they are also at the same time stopping us if we have now transitioned to renewable energy, solar being one of the primary sources of that. We will cut the amount of electricity generated and available for the world. We will put the world into a blackout or a brownout. We will significantly hurt the planet by trying to do this, which has not been considered. It's not in the article that I'm presenting to you, or any of the other articles that I've noticed on this. And by no means I'm not a scientist, so I can't say that I have all the information on this, but it's important to know what's out there. So what they want to do is they want to put chemicals into the air, which will then cool the earth. And one of the key things that I found here, and one of the key statements, so forgetting about the impact on the energy of the United States or the world for that matter, here's the thing. Only a small fraction, 0.4% of the planet might see climate change impacts worsen, the study says. This is based on a study that was done on geoengineering the planet and changing the sun. And that's important. And again, this was done by, and this is being reported by the Guardian newspaper on a Harvard study. So here's the thing. 0.4% of the Earth sounds like a really, really small number. And I would have probably ignored it. Like most people, completely ignored this story. No one paid attention. No one was thinking about it. And then I realized something. What is 0.4% of the planet? What is actually 0.4% of the Earth? I actually did some math on this study. Because if you look into the study and in the article and several others that came out today, this is as of today, March 12th, the article came out. They're talking about 0.4% of the ice, the non-ice land of the planet. So let's figure it out. First of all, we know that there are roughly 196.9 million square miles on the surface of the Earth. Approximately 15 million square miles of that is covered with ice, glaciers of that sort. And we know that about 139.8 million square miles is water, 71% of the planet. So these numbers are all approximate, but this is the math I'm working with. That means that there's about 57,101 square miles of the planet that is what we think of as the land on Earth, where all the nations are, where all the people are. So what is 0.4% of the planet? Well, that works out to roughly 228, if I did my math right, and I'm not a scientist and I'm not a mathematician, but please check me on this, but if I'm right on my math, that's about 228,404 square miles. What does that number mean? I know, I threw a bunch of numbers at you. Everyone's going, well, it's numbers. What does that mean? I did all that math to figure out this. We're talking about roughly Madagascar. We're talking about enough land to be the size of Madagascar. Give you a different nation to try and judge this by. We're talking about the same size of land as Afghanistan. To put it in a different way, for people who are in the United States who would have more of an understanding of different land masses, we're talking about this bigger than the state of California. That's what they're talking about. So some, and probably coastally, but not necessarily, it could be inland, it doesn't matter, because we're talking about the impact on the planet. So if you're talking about California, I mean, think about the millions of people that live in the state of California, the most populous state in the United States, as I recall. That's millions, tens of millions of people being affected by their theory and their test. And they're testing this out. They're going to try and run a small scale. Who knows what that does? But they're going to try this. Imagine this. They're willing to affect the entire planet, to take away electricity and power generation and completely destroy the Green New Deal, which relies on solar energy, to get rid of the greenhouse gases, to lower the temperature of the planet, that we don't even know if that will work. We don't even know if that's going to have a positive impact. We have no idea what this will do to life on the planet. But they want to dim the sunlight reaching us because they're willing to take California, tens of millions of people, minimally, and make their lives worse. To give them earthquakes, fires, floods, hurricanes, possibly tsunamis, and throw that at those people across the nation. Enough land to be Afghanistan, an island like Hawaii, Madagascar, to affect people everywhere. That would affect, we're talking coastal cities. You're talking about New York. You're talking about Miami. You're talking about LA. You're talking about London. You're talking about massive locations throughout the world thrown into chaos because, well, it seems like a good idea. Can you imagine that? And this is something that no one's talking about. It's an idea that everyone's skipped past. No one's thinking about it. It's not on anyone's radar. No one's talking about it. And yet, this is something that's going to affect the globe. That they are moving forward and trying this idea. Look at the science. We keep hearing this from the Green New Deal, the people, the Democratic Socialists, this push towards renewable energy and mandating changes to our environment that we have no understanding of. The planet has been 27 times, I believe it is, 27 times the planet has been a complete desert and a complete ice ball. The planet's temperature and weather changes constantly for billions of years, according to the science. It changes every day throughout our lifetimes, all 50 years of my life. And we have absolutely no way of changing that. The sun will beam down its light, the earth will turn, and we will have weather. And the planet will get hotter and colder. Every scientist agrees. The planet at some point will be hotter, and at some point it will be colder. No matter what mankind does, that's what the planet does. And we have no idea whether that is happening right now or not. So whether you believe in man-made climate change or not, the planet's going to change its climate. That is a fact. And it may be happening right now. Humanity's been on the planet, 30 seconds, looking at the life of the planet? And we're talking about changing everything. We're talking about changing the entire planet, the ecosystem of the world for a couple of degrees, or maybe a degree, if their models, which they admit are based on an ideal horror situation, that the climate has grown several degrees and under this massive horror story of global warming. And based on that horror story, they're telling us that, this is the answer. We're going to change the entire life of all Earth. Because dimming the sun, let's think about that. That means you're affecting every single plant, which means all of the food we eat. Every single plant affects every single cow. It affects every vegetarian, every vegan, all of the herbivores. It affects the trees that grow and give us oxygen. It affects fish and plankton. There is no aspect of life on this planet that isn't affected, and they're saying, hey, here's a neat idea, let's change it all. Because it might work. This is yet another thing that no one's talking about the news, and this really needs to be talked about. This is a dangerous idea. This is deadly, potentially. And I'm terrified of it. I don't see how this could possibly be a good thing. In every aspect. Whether it's the Green New Deal, even going from the Green New Deal. Even if we were to accept the Green New Deal, this is a bad idea, because where it leads us is into a place where we're going to have even less power and less food and less ability to feed the world, and it's just bad. I don't see how this is a positive answer to global warming, even if you accept that it's man-made or not, which is a question all its own. But as the buzzer went off, it's time for another break. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back for our last segment talking about something completely different. But I hope you're enjoying it so far, and I'm checking the chat, I'm checking the tweets and texts, but let me know what you're thinking, and we'll be right back. Hey everybody, and we're back. This is Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier, and I'm here with you at the No Soundbites Allowed podcast on the Exceptional Conservative Network, TECN.TV. And I hope you're enjoying the network and some of the programming here. I hope you're enjoying my show. And we're going to talk about a bunch of things. So we've covered a lot of ground so far, and I'm sure that these are not the issues that you may normally hear about, but they're definitely the issues that affect us all. They're really important, and I definitely want to talk more about them. Going into the future, we're going to be talking about a lot of other things as well. We're going to be talking about, with various people, we have a lot of interviews coming in. I think you'll enjoy them. We may be talking to, as an example, Representative Anthony Brindisi, hopefully either Thursday or maybe on Saturday. And we'll have other guests that we'll announce as we go forward. By the way, I want to mention the bands that you've heard today. The first one is a local band here in New York. It's called Adam Ate the Apple. They have an album. They have a couple of albums out there. I definitely recommend them. Check them out on YouTube. You can look up the link as I had shown it. You can also we were just listening to the Gypsies. The main singer there is Matt Cornwell, a friend of mine, also in the New York region, and a great band. I think they do great work, and I hope you enjoy them. As a quick aside, I do want to mention one quick note here that No Soundbites Allowed survives because of your help. And please, feel free, donate $1, donate $2, whatever you can do. We appreciate any and all help that you provide to us. It helps keeps the light on, keep the studio open, keep the program going. So we do appreciate any and all help if you so choose, if you're enjoying the program and would like to see more. Separate of that, and I'll have links at the end of the show. I'm going to have links. We always put links to everything that we're talking about, what you see here, so that you'll be able to look it up for yourself and be able to make your own decision about the information we're talking about, so that you can make whatever choice you wish on these issues. But obviously I'm running out of time, so let me get to the last thing that I wanted to talk about here today. And I'm not giving myself a lot of time, but we want to talk a little bit about the Second Amendment. And I'm a massive advocate of the Second Amendment, massive advocate. And I believe that it's one of the most important, if not the most important, of our rights, because it gives the backbone to everything else. And I'm not the only person to believe that. In fact, we see that Craig Press, which is out of Colorado, has come out, and they have now joined in Moffat County. Their city and the county, they've come forward as a sanctuary city. Now, a lot of people may be wondering, what do you mean by sanctuary city? What's that all about? Very simple. There has been a movement, obviously we've heard about sanctuary cities for illegal aliens, and it violates federal law in these counties and cities where they've done that, like New York State, like California, where they've even gone to the state level and ignore federal law about individuals who have broken the law, who are criminally in the United States. But why not take that same principle, that laws that are bad or ideas that are bad, that negatively impact the nation and hurt citizens' rights, why not provide a sanctuary to that? And especially in defense of some of the laws that we see that are taking that on. In particular, like as an example, the red flag legislation. And I have been talking about red flag legislation massively since I first learned about it about a year ago, right after the incident at Parkland, Florida. And so what we're seeing here is a law that I think is absolutely dangerous, absolutely dangerous. And I've written a lot about red flag legislation, and I invite you to check out the mvass.com and find out for yourself more about it. I've written many, many comprehensive articles about this, but essentially that is the latest idea, to take away your Second Amendment rights without ever having committed a crime because someone says you could be dangerous. And because you could be dangerous, you are denied your Second Amendment rights without any due process, which can lead to, and in most states will lead to, if you have children in the household, losing those children as well to the state. And I go into it in great depth in other places. And each law in each state is relatively the same with some changes. But essentially, someone is saying that you're dangerous. Therefore, a judge puts out a warrant. Police come execute it, usually between 5 and 7 in the morning, and take every firearm that's in the household. You then have the right to go to court and try and prove that you are not a danger, which is not a crime in the first place. But then you get to defend yourself against this allegation, and you can get your property back. In the meantime, because this has happened, police have to notify Child Protective Services, which exist in pretty much every state to some degree or another. And if your home is so dangerous and you are such a threat that the government has to take away your Second Amendment rights, that they have to come into your home to take and seize your property, then your home is, by definition, in pretty much every state that has a Child Protective Services, your home is too dangerous for you to have children. And therefore, they'll take the kids too. And now you have to fight to get your children back against the state, which I have heard estimated at somewhere between in the tens of thousands of dollars, all because you didn't commit a crime. You've done nothing wrong. You've not broken any law. But because someone has an opinion, because someone feels that you are dangerous, therefore you are. And that's a problem with our society right now, or our media, and the movement in a lot of the social justice, that direction that they're trying to push it in, social justice, the fringe extremists of the Democratic Party, the Democratic Socialists, they're looking at feelings. What feels right to them is more important than what is true, what is factually correct. And I say all of that, to bring us back to what are we seeing across the nation? Well, as I mentioned, in Craig, Colorado, we see that they've come out and said, no, we protect and we abide by and we believe in the Second Amendment. And that they are a sanctuary for the rights of the Second Amendment for the citizens. And this is in direct contradiction to the potential of a red flag legislation in Colorado. And that news came out to March 11th. But they're not the only ones. In fact, we've seen even the Wall Street Journal came out with an article in reference to this, and they were talking about that today, that across counties, across America, over 100 counties, over 4 cities, in New Mexico, even Illinois, the pretty much bastion of gun rights restrictions and gun control, we have seen that there has been nothing but a revolt, and people saying, no, we want to protect the Second Amendment. It is a vital part of our rights and our nation. And in fact, we see that, and there are well over 100 different counties and cities. Looking at just a quick list and going to Wikipedia, just to give you a quick idea, you're talking about 14 counties in Colorado, now 15, in another city. You're looking at 62 counties in Illinois. You're looking at 3 in Maryland. You're looking at 26 counties in New Mexico. New York has 2 counties and various cities and organizations fighting against the SAFE Act and the red flag legislation. You're looking at Oregon with 13 counties. You're looking at 24 counties in Washington. You're talking about well over 100 different counties all fighting against red flag legislation, the gun control, the ideology of democratic socialists to destroy the Second Amendment and take away a person's right to defend themselves, to defend their property, to defend their homes from those who would try and take those away, which includes the government. So not just robberies, not just because they want to go hunting, not just for the sporting aspects of owning a firearm, which are all important, but to defend themselves, their families, and their homes. And this includes women being able to defend themselves against rape, women who are trying to defend themselves against domestic abuse. These are important aspects. And if you look at this red flag ideology, this gun control, think about this. Gun control is not new. There are literally thousands of gun control laws in the nation. In the last year, roughly 126 gun legislation, gun restriction laws have been put in place. And we still have gun violence. The emphasis is not against the criminal with these laws. The red flag legislation isn't trying to stop a criminal. It's stopping law-abiding citizens from protecting themselves. So we have to ask, why is gun control and gun restriction legislation that already exists targeting citizens who follow the law and not affecting criminals? We're in a dangerous place, and that's why we have sanctuary cities who recognize protecting citizens is what government is supposed to do, not attack them. And it seems democratic socialists don't agree. And that's why we need sanctuary cities for the Second Amendment. But these are my thoughts. This is my conversation with you, and I'm looking forward to following up with many, many more ideas that you may not have heard about. You may not know that there have been so many locations across the nation that have been fighting against this. But this has been my hour here on the Exceptional Conservative Network, the TECN.TV. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the introduction to me and what I do. I hope you enjoy the channel. You're going to see the next show coming up in just a moment. I have to go now, but I will be back on Thursday at 1 o'clock, Saturday, 12 noon to 2, and I look forward to speaking to you all again very, very soon.